welcome to the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon in North Carolina.
And I'm David Heller in Oklahoma.
And thanks for joining us tonight. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. So glad, David, to have you on tonight as always, and thank you to everyone for joining us. We got a pretty bizarre main story to tell you about tonight, and that has to do with the U.S. Supreme Court in the state of Oklahoma, because basically, as David is about to tell everyone, Oklahoma could be in the process of losing control over a better part of half of the state.
That's right. And there was a Supreme Court ruling that came down just a couple days ago. And it had to do, Jonathan, it was my understanding that it had to do with a criminal case that was done, I believe, over 20 years ago.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that somebody tried to say that because of the fact that the crime was committed on the Indian Territory side of Oklahoma, which I did send you a map on Messenger
Right.
that I want for the viewers of home to see. But first, let me share my screen.
Okay.
Share. So pretty much, this is the whole map of Oklahoma, as you can see. So pretty much where the crime was committed at is pretty much on the Indian Territory side of Oklahoma. In fact, I will just annotate this part for you. Yeah, format it. So pretty much this is all of the Indian Territory right through here. So pretty much this is where the whole crime was committed, somewhere in here on Indian Territory. And specifically, it was committed here in Creek Nation, or Muskogee Nation. So therefore, that individual felt that because the crime was committed here and not somewhere over here,
right,
that he felt like that it should have been a federal criminal case that should have been taken up in a federal court and not in a state court. Either that, or it should have been taken up by the tribal court and not the state court, which was essentially what was done. So pretty much he went, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, where they finally ruled on it, and pretty much it was a 5-4 opinion, and obviously Jonathan has the article for that pulled up.
The court opinion from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the court opinion that pretty much ruled that all of this part right through here is pretty much, as Jonathan and I talked about off the air, it's pretty much like, in a sense, and I don't know if that's accurately describing this, but in a way, it's kind of like a foreign domestic territory. Pretty much.
It's really kind of an odd deal, isn't it? Because you're dealing with what it kind of comes back to is basically a treaty, more or less. And treaties, common logic would dictate that the treaties has to do with foreign, like a country-to-country deal. Well, in a sense, that the United States basically says, yeah, this is sort of a country, although they use the word nation, and I do believe there's the slightest bit of a difference in the meaning. In nation, it's kind of like this group of people that have this quote-unquote right to self-determination or self-governance, if you will. And what's kind of fascinating about this, David, and I will get to that court opinion in just a second, but I want to just say, and leave that image up for a second. I'm just kind of I can just imagine people at home, their heads are just about to explode right now to think about a state supposedly fixing to lose control over certain portion of their state. Now, as we're going to look at in this court opinion, it does seem to leave some little bit of wiggle room to allow for Oklahoma to still have jurisdiction for people who are not Native Americans or Indians. But that's kind of, again, once they have now opened up this can of worms. So you ask, every person seems to have a different thought or opinion about this. So this is just a complete mess right now that we're finding ourselves in right now.
Yes.
And right in the middle of that state, you have to acknowledge that you got Oklahoma City that's just virtually surrounded on three sides by these things. Now, I do wonder, because I genuinely am not clear about this, and I would like to see if you know anything about this. If it's true that they can have this nation deal on the eastern side of the state, or really also south central side, what's to stop those areas to the west from being recognized as reservations as well?
Exactly. I think it's entirely possible that you could have these tribes join in with these over here, or you could see a scenario where even some of these smaller tribes, including where it would involve Lincoln County, where I currently live at.
Yeah.
So
I was just fixing to get to that.
So pretty much here's Chandler right in here where I drew the circle. And
that's
Chandler,
where you are.
Right. And Chandler is pretty much on the line of being in Sac and Fox Nation, which is a smaller Indian tribe, which, as you can probably make out, you have all these smaller tribes here. It's entirely possible that these smaller tribes, as well as these smaller tribes up here, including Osage Nation, could join these bigger Indian tribes and pretty much leave Oklahoma. And in doing so, it would pretty much surround Oklahoma City in a way where you have all these large and even in some situations smaller Indian tribes pretty much forming its own sovereign domestic country in a way.
Well, I'd like to point this out too, that this area right here, this white area, and I'm putting up some arrows right now, or I'm kind of trying to describe this as best as I can. This white zone is basically, as I interpret this, the only real free and clear area that Oklahoma has anymore, if this is to be interpreted literally and fully. It's completely insane. And I'd like to point this out too. This has already been a well-established fact here, but look at this. Now, I don't know, David, you know more about Oklahoma than I do, but look at all these little microzones on the far northeast corner of the state. Are all of these to be seen as nations, or are all these just historic?
Yes. Those what you're pointing out, those are all Indian nations. That is up in Ottawa County, up along the Missouri border that
Right.
you're talking about right here. That's all of the Indian tribes that are in that little corner right in here.
So basically, let's just think of it like this. Let's think of it like this. What if, see now, look at this. I mean, just the incredible reality that we're seeing here. We're talking about this area right here, and we're talking about potentially this area down here. Now, I include a little more than I should have, but I'm just approximating this. Oklahoma, I mean, I cannot even begin to imagine the revenue that's going to plummet. They're going to, it's just unbelievable. Basically, Oklahoma, in terms of its free and clear area of control, it's going to be the Oklahoma City Metro, which is not even to include all of that, actually, because out to the east and into the far south below Moore, I think. Isn't Norman considered part of the Chickasaw? Okay, so that's not
that's pretty much going once you're going south out of I-35, going out of Norman, that's pretty much where the Chickasaw Nation begins, and that includes Chickasha.
Yeah, well, that's what I was referring to. So, but the point is that this is just a complete mess, and I'm having a hard time trying to interpret this myself. It's just I just cannot believe this. Just points out again the U.S. Supreme Court has way too much power. It's just unbelievable. Now, David.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd like to supersede your screen to share this court opinion. Now, Chris Ann Hall, who's a constitutional lawyer or attorney, whatever she's considered to be, she made a good point of it on her show, that basically this is not to be seen as a court ruling, and I'm paraphrasing, but they don't issue rulings, they issue opinions in a manner of speaking. And that's very key, because the Supreme Court, when you think about it, has way too much, as I just said, way too much power. They should not have the kind of power to basically seize upon control, seize certain parts of Oklahoma from Oklahoma. It's just completely insane. Now, I understand this treaty and stuff, and we'll get to that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. As I said, this is coming up now. This is now. Don't let this irk you, anyone watching. Even though this does say October term 2019, this was issued just a few days ago. So this is a very new release of this opinion. We'll just say. Now, of course, this is from the Supreme Court of the United States. McGirt versus Oklahoma, argued on May 11th. So not that long ago. Decided on the 9th of July this month. Now, I'm not going to obviously read all of this, but let's just read. This is an area of the document I'd like to draw people's attention to here. And I'm going to quote here. Section A, Congress established a reservation for the Creek Nation. In 1833, treaty fixed borders for a permanent home to the whole Creek Nation of Indians, and promised that the United States would grant a patent in fee simple, I'll come back to that word in a moment, to the Creek Nation of Indians for the assigned, and obviously they added the word for emphasis, assigned land, to continue so long as they shall exist as a nation and continue to occupy the country hereby assigned to them. The patent formally issued in 1852. Though the early treaties did not refer to the Creek lands as a quote-unquote reservation, similar language in treaties from the same era, I should say, has been held sufficient to create a reservation. And one court case they cite here is, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the Menominee tribe versus Menominee tribe versus the United States, and later acts of Congress, referring to the Creek Reservation, leaving no room for doubt. In addition, an 1856 treaty promised that no portion of Creek lands, and this is the key phrase, I think this is what got Oklahoma here, would ever be embraced or included within or annexed to any territory or state. And this is, they cite a statute here, or I assume this is referring to a statute, and that the Creeks would have the unrestricted right of self-government with full jurisdiction over enrolled tribe members and their property. And then the court says that Congress has since broken more than a few promises to the tribe. Nonetheless, the Creek Reservation persists today. Once a federal reservation is established, only Congress can diminish or disestablish it. Doing so requires a clear expression of congressional intent. Now, I'm going to keep going here, and I know this is getting a little lengthy, but just bear with me one more moment here. Oklahoma claims that Congress ended the Creek Reservation during the so-called allotment era, a period when Congress sought to pressure many tribes to abandon their communal lifestyles and parcel their lands into smaller lots owned by individual tribal members. Missing from the allotment era agreement with the Creek, however, is the statute evincing. I wonder if they meant to say evidencing, but I don't know. Evincing anything like the present and total surrender of all tribal interests in the affected lands. And this court has already rejected the argument that allotments automatically ended reservations. Oklahoma points to other ways Congress intruded on the Creek's promised right of self-governance during the allotment era, including abolishing the Creek's tribal courts and requiring presidential approval for certain tribal ordinances. But these laws fall short of eliminating all tribal interests in the contested lands. Oklahoma ultimately claims that historical practice and demographics are enough by themselves to prove disestablishment. This court has consulted contemporaneous usages, customs, and practices to the extent they shed light on the meaning of ambiguous statutory terms, but Oklahoma points to no ambiguous language in any of the relevant statutes that could plausibly be read as an act of cession. Such extra textual considerations are of limited interpretive value. Now, we're really getting into the weeds here, and they keep on going, their reasoning, their logic. Ultimately, the outcome of this opinion by the Supreme Court, David, was to say that the Creek Reservation never ceased to exist. And of course, they acknowledge that the word reservation wasn't used, but they used similar language. And if you look at precedent or I should say, other similar kind of dealings with other Indian quote unquote nations, that was enough for the Supreme Court to recognize them as a quote unquote reservation. Now, David, this is the thing that really bugs me about this. And that is, we have already created a state in correct me if I'm wrong, but 1907, right?
Yes, 1907 was when Oklahoma became a state.
Okay. Now, I was telling you this, David, off the air on the phone the other day or a couple of days ago here, and that when you create a state, now I'm no constitutional scholar, if you will, but I believe I know enough to say this, that when you create a state is essentially a sovereign entity in the republic. It's like when we have presidential elections, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And why do I say that? One of the reasons I say that is because we don't have one election each presidential election or, whatever. We have 50, the current number of states is 50. So we have 50 different elections taking place at the same time. So my point in mentioning that is the fact each state within their boundaries are domestically, I don't mean internationally, I mean domestically within the republic, or I should say making a part, they're forming a part of the republic. They are sovereign in that sense. So, and they only delegate certain powers to the federal government. And that federal government is not to exceed that authority because the 10th Amendment makes that pretty clear. Now, I'm building up to this point, and that is the very entity that states like Oklahoma they give certain powers to the federal government. And in return, look what the federal government just did. They just said, oh, I'm sorry, Oklahoma, this doesn't belong to you. I mean, now here's the thing. I originally read this to mean, and I still kind of wonder about this, whether Oklahoma would have to literally redraw its borders to be tremendously less. Now, my thinking on this has shifted a little bit. Instead of that, I think that probably Oklahoma can stay as their current size and scope, or in terms of size, but they will not have jurisdiction over the Indians in those areas. Those of us, well, you've told me that you might have a little bit of Indian in your blood, but in terms of myself and people like me that are not of Indian or Native American descent, theoretically, Oklahoma will still have jurisdiction. But that's not, but the thing is, I'm going to go back. I'm going to share my screen again because I want people, and I forgot to mention one other thing, but I want people to understand, to really hone in on this. In 1856, there was a treaty that promised that no portion of Creek lands, and here's the quote, would ever be embraced or included within or annexed to any territory or state. So again, in my opinion, because of that sovereignty thing having to do with being a state, it should be enough to override this. But if this is to take precedent even over that, then I have to wonder whether Oklahoma is literally not even entitled to having this at all. So I don't know. Again, I don't pretend to know the answer on this. I'm just kind of learning this as I go along, and I'm trying to convey what I'm learning to the audience as best as I can. But I don't know if Oklahoma, it might just be able to retain its current shape, but it's forever going to be changed unless this is very expeditiously undone.
I agree with that. And, pretty much as I, shared with, my map before, like what we talked about, some of the smaller Indian tribes that include my area could just follow suit and join those other larger tribes like the Cherokees, the Creeks, the Seminole, Choctaw, all those other larger nations that people could, refer to back on the earlier portion of this episode.
Right.
And if that happens, yours truly might be screwed over here. Because a way, technically, I live on an Indian reservation here, specifically
historically,
Fox Nation.
Yeah, this is a can of worms that, I mean, I don't think we've actually just came around and said this yet, but let's say this too. Tulsa is completely now, or I don't know if it's completely, but
it's completely
done. It's done. It's no longer in Oklahoma's hands. If you're an Indian and if you claim that heritage or that whatever, then Oklahoma has no say-so over you anymore. And if you're not an Indian, you're still having to deal with that headache of that jurisdictional thing. And this is a huge deal, David. And I want to, before I forget to mention this, I want to draw people's attention to fee simple. I did a terrible job in drawing that. Let me try this again. In fee simple, okay, we got this term right here that they would grant a patent in fee simple to the Cherokee Nation of Indians for the assigned land to continue so long as they shall exist as a nation. Now, why do I mention this? Now, Chris Ann Hall on her show also mentioned this, but I believe that this is very important to also point out. Fee simple. Now, this is Google, so Google, if they don't want you knowing certain, Google likes to, Google's Google, but taking this at face value. They say, whatever they're citing, that fee simple is, by definition, a permanent and absolute tenure of an estate in land with freedom to dispose of it at will, especially in full fee simple absolute, a freehold tenure, which is the main type of land ownership. Now, this is, of course, derived from the common law, which comes from England and all that stuff. Now, the reason why I mention this, if land deeds will often, actually probably most of the time, if not every time, will say something to the effect of fee simple or the equivalent. Now, let me rephrase what I just read to you. Fee simple basically means that you have this right to this property that to the fullest extent possible, you have the right to it, basically, to do with it as you will, to the extent that the system allows you to, okay? So that's basically what fee simple means. And this is exactly the language that they conveyed to the Creek Nation. So this is a very significant thing as well. This isn't just them saying vaguely, this is your land. They said fee simple, meaning absolutely it's yours. So again, this is one of those things we're going to have to follow this, and we don't really know as of right now, as we're taping, as what's going to really happen here, because those negotiations are ongoing. And I'll like to remind viewers that that states cannot negotiate treaties. So the president will probably have to get involved at some point if there's to be a new treaty or a new anything done to that treaty, substantively to change it. They will have to involve the Congress or the president. They'll have to do something like that. So this is, as I said, the Supreme Court just opened up a big can of worms. Now, one more thing I'd like to share with viewers, and that is this. This is the first, or I should say the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Now, I won't bother reading all of this, but I'll read to you the part that's applicable, in my opinion, to this. Now, this is just my opinion. This is just my reading as I read the Constitution. The final part of Amendment 5 reads, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." Now, let me just say this again. The Constitution is the supreme law, the lawful law of this country. This is, or I should say, the Constitution is our system. That is our system of government. That's the document that's binding as to how the government is to be in this country. And this is so. What I don't really care what these treaties say. In my opinion, the Supreme Court could have done one of two things differently. And again, this is strictly my personal opinion. I am not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I'm just saying what I think personally is one of two things should have happened instead of what they did with this mess. One is they should have kept it narrowly focused on this one person, this criminal, that said, okay, Oklahoma has no jurisdiction over you. And then shut up. They shouldn't have said anything more than that. Because if they be having said more than that, they have now opened up this can of worms that's going to cause a headache for everybody, thanks to this one nincompoop that thought he was exempt from, he thought he could get away scot-free by just saying, I'm an Indian, so I'm exempt. I can do whatever.
Right. And also not just a headache for all of Oklahomans that live on the eastern side of the state, but it could potentially be a headache for yours truly as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a disgrace what just happened. Now the other thing, that was one scenario, that alternative scenario that I think could have and should have happened. Just my opinion again. The other scenario I envision is to say, look, okay, we'll acknowledge the treaty's still in force, but instead of applying that as literal in the modern day, we also acknowledge the sovereignty of the state of Oklahoma, the inherent sovereignty they have by becoming a state, achieving statehood. So in keeping with that, we will, instead of giving you back this land, we will acknowledge that it quote unquote belongs to you, but we're going to order that whatever entity they say should pay, whether it's the state of Oklahoma or the federal government or both, it doesn't really matter. They should have said, look, under the Fifth Amendment, we're going to just compensate you. We're going to figure out how much per acre to compensate you, and then we're just going to call it done, period. And we're just going to say, Oklahoma, you're in the free and clear now. Have a nice day. It's just, to me, that should have been the other scenario that should have been considered. And instead, though, they did the worst imaginable thing possible. And now they have created this disaster that's going to take years to figure this out, how exactly to go forward.
Yep. And it's You said it. It's just created an absolute disaster, not just for a large chunk of Oklahoma, but pretty much the entire Tulsa metro area is in the Indian Territory side. Think about it. The entire Tulsa metro area, with the exception of maybe the far northwest side and all that's up in
all of that. County. All of that is, if you're living up in correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that called Oklahoma or Oklahoma Panhandle?
Yeah, pretty much the OKC metro area in the northwest Oklahoma and the Panhandle. And I'll share my screen again one more time so that way the viewers can see what we're talking about here. Let me first off, let me get that out of the way. Oops.
We don't mean to create free promotion of Zoom, by the way. This just happened to be there.
Yes, I do apologize for that.
Oh,
but,
no worries, no worries. I just had to make fun of that.
Yeah. There you are. Okay, so here, well, Barnes and Noble. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay, so pretty much, and I'll get this out of the way. There we go.
If I may, David, can I actually draw, or do you want to be the one? I was just gonna. Oh gosh, where did it go? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so again, just to draw everyone's attention to this, we are talking about this area right here. We're also talking about basically anywhere I'm putting an arrow. This white area that you see here, and I could probably represent this in a better way, but anything that's in this white area is free and clear Oklahoma. There is no question that Oklahoma is entitled to this. Both historically and contemporary, in a contemporary sense as well. So this is the issue, though, that Oklahoma is now going to have to figure out how it's going to go forward, because obviously you cannot. There's nobody that the leftists. Here's the thing. The leftists are destroying America. They're trying to destroy America because this is how they do it. They divide and they conquer. They create this anarchy, because this is. I don't mean to fearmonger, but I have a hard time seeing how this is going to be, how this is going to end well. Because you now got all these little governments over here, and you could go shoot somebody in a town in, let's say, the Creek Reservation, the newly re-recognized Creek Reservation. Let's say some guy of Native American descent goes and shoots somebody. Well, he could just say, hey, I'm exempt. I can do whatever I want. Now, I don't know. As I understand it, there might be federal jurisdiction to some extent, at least, over even Native Americans. So but again, this is one of those things that we should have years ago have created clear-cut definitions. Instead, this very porous kind of sort of, this very ambiguous kind of deal. Because right now it's going to be a disaster.
It is going to be an absolute disaster. And and it's not just going to be an absolute disaster for not just this entire area up here. It's going to be a disaster for everybody here, and not just here, but it's going to be a disastrous scenario for everybody right through here.
Oh yeah.
With the exception of this part right in here.
That's just unbelievable. I mean, in the year 2020, and we're talking about this. This is how insane this is.
It is. It is absolutely sickening.
Yeah.
Absolutely sickening.
Hey,
as a born and raised Okie, that here's the thing. I was born in Oklahoma. I've been raised in Oklahoma all my life. 21 years I've been on this earth. I've been raised in this state of Oklahoma. And yet here we are in 2020. In 2020, we're having an issue over this.
This thought just came into my head too. What about all these marriages, like these brides and grooms getting married in like the eastern part of the state? I would just bet they just better not say that there's an issue with the validity of that as far as the state's concerned. If it's done in, if a bride and groom gets married in holy matrimony, it's marriage anyway. But I'm saying as to the state of Oklahoma, is there now going to be a question over things like that?
Exactly.
This is insane.
on top of that, you have to figure out, your driver's license. You have to figure out the license plates. You have to figure out every single freaking thing.
Oh, yeah. David, it's like, I know somebody out there is probably not going to like me for saying this, but I just got to say it. I wish that these people, with all due respect, we were wrong to forcibly remove the Indians from their native lands. I totally get that. I totally believe that at the time that there should have been just compensation. There should have been something done to right that. But we are now in the year 2020. Nobody from those days are even alive anymore in this world, and yet we're talking about this. And then also, it's like at some point, I don't mean then, but like now, especially in the year 2020. Can we not just tell these people to pick in a side on citizenship? You're either an American or you're not. Because I don't go around saying, now I cherish my Great Britain, and I mean that all inclusively, the British Isles, like that's my ancestry, okay? I cherish that. But I don't go around saying that I deserve to have a reservation in the United States where only Irish people can, rule the day. I just, or Scotch Irish or British, whatever. My point is that this is insane that we have these areas in the United States of America that's just opting out. It's just insane, David.
It is. It's just absolutely nuts that on top of all that the only part of the area that is free and clear for Oklahoma in general is from the OKC metro area going north and east past Stillwater, and then everything going up toward Kansas and going west toward the panhandle of Oklahoma. It is absolutely nuts.
And it's insane. It's insane.
Absolutely. It's just absolutely insane that we're sitting here talking about this.
Oh yeah. This is. Can you even believe? Can you even believe that 2020 is like this? Can you even believe that we flipped the calendar to 2020 and bam, this is what happens. It's just like, golly. And let me just say this too. It's like, they get to say that they're immune to our system. Okay. But at the same time, they can claim full American citizenship rights. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry. You get more rights than I do? With all due respect, I have a major problem with that. That I think the founding fathers, people want to say that, we were born on the backs of slavery. That is completely untrue. Because actually, when we were founded as a country, slavery wasn't even widely accepted by us. The British forced it on us. But my point being is that the idea, the thing is, the founding fathers meant for everyone to be equal. And we've worked over time to perfect, in the good sense, perfect that meaning of everyone being equal, women being treated equally, things like that, blacks being treated equally, and that we've gotten better with that. My point is that in our rule of law, our system of law, we're supposed to all be equal, and yet we're giving more rights to certain groups of people. How on earth is that equal? I'm just saying. I don't mean to make anyone mad, but I just have to ask that question. I just have a problem with these zones where you can own a property and that's it. But for us, we have to pay property taxes, and if you want to find out who really owns that property, just stop paying your property taxes.
There you go.
The government will just say, nope, it's mine now, even though that's completely unconstitutional again. But that is how it works. It's just like, I know not that long ago, maybe a couple months ago, I forget exactly when, there's this tiny reservation down below the state line here in South Carolina. And those anybody that's local who might be watching this, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. I forget the exact name, but I want to call it it's the Catawba Indian Reservation. Well, it's a very small area. But here's the deal. They have this little area for their little reservation. They also have this little area adjacent to that where you literally have people living on that property. Now, David, I could be wrong, but as I understand it, if you're an Indian and you own property, you literally are like a king on that property. Like you never have to worry about ever having anything happen to you with that property.
Exactly, and pretty much anymore these days, the same applies to I imagine people of color, Hispanics, any other non-white people you look at. But for somebody like you or I,
yeah,
we're screwed.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like, the thing is, someone made a great point the other day. I was listening the other day, I should say, to this person talking about the common law. And I thought it was fascinating that it was like he was saying it was almost incorrect to say we're citizens. Like when it says in the start of the Constitution, it says we the people. Like by saying you're one of the people of this country, that is like the fullest amount of rights you could possibly invoke in this country is by saying you're one of the people. Like it exceeds even above the meaning of citizen. Now, I mention that because in this country, David, we're all supposed to have these unalienable rights. And yet, if you're an Indian, you get these special privileges. And also, I get it. A lot of Indian reservations, they're terrible to live on. Like the living conditions are awful. I get that. But at the same time, why in the world can we not just help these people assimilate into our society instead of trying to keep these segregations, trying to keep things separate? I just don't get that. Why? Like, there has to be a way of acknowledging their heritage without having them be separate like this, or causing havoc to everyone else.
It's like, why in the world, here we are in 2020, and yet we're still having issues about segregation. It's just nuts.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Just absolutely nuts that here we are in 2020, and yet we still have not learned our lessons from what our parents experienced when they were growing up in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have to just continue to follow this because honestly, I really don't have, even me just talking about these issues with property rights, I'm not even really sure about them because I really just don't know that much about their way of their system, because you don't just have like this one other quote unquote sovereign thing. You've got all these different Indian reservations all over the place. And it's just like, my head just wants to explode. It's just, golly. It's even more bizarre than like those two, like a couple of countries over in Europe that literally you've got this cafe or something like with the border running down it or something alongside of it. I mean, that's how it's even more mind blowing than things like that. It's just truly insane. It's just truly insane.
It is.
But before we wrap up, I do have a couple of updates to bring to viewers' attention as well. One being that many of you out there probably know exactly who Roger Stone is. He was given a kangaroo court. The deep state wanted to throw him under the bus, probably wanted to suicide him after he gone to jail. Who knows? And yet President Trump at the last moment finally had enough. And this is a statement from the White House press secretary, and it is official. President Donald J. Trump granted an executive grant of clemency for Roger Stone Jr. It's just now here's one thing. I want to read this for viewers. Mr. Stone was charged by the same prosecutors from the Mueller investigation tasked with finding evidence of collusion with Russia. Because no such evidence exists, however, they could not charge him for any collusion-related crime. Instead, they charged him for his conduct during their investigation. The simple fact is that if the special counsel had not been pursuing an absolute baseless investigation, Mr. Stone would not be facing time in prison. So they tried, David, they tried to give this guy the runaround. They tried to take this Roger Stone guy down because he's for Trump. And this is what the deep state does. And finally, and thankfully, President Trump finally said enough and granted clemency. Now, I can't confirm this, but I was listening to InfoWars earlier today, and it is my understanding that the president wanted to grant Roger Stone a pardon, but Roger Stone only wanted clemency, and there is a distinct difference. So, so Trump granted him clemency, which at least has the same effect of getting him out of this debacle. It's just that the pardon would fully do away with anything. But the clemency kind of reduces the severity, and in effect, this has made Roger Stone a free man again. So thankfully, this just happened. So this is some good news for everyone, and we could certainly use some of that right now.
Oh yeah.
And they tried to take this man down. They had CNN out at his house in South Florida early in the morning, and that CNN was given an award for their coverage of that. Oh, I can bet you anything that CNN was tipped off. They don't have a journalist in that. They don't have one. You would be hard pressed to find me one journalist in that whole entire organization. Now that thing is rotten to the core, thanks to Jeff Zucker and more historically, Ted Turner. It's just incredible. It's just incredible.
I think that if we could just shut CNN down completely, I'd be happy with it.
Yeah, I would be too. And David, did you?
I'd literally be happy if AT&T would shut down CNN. I would.
Yeah, I would be too.
Be happy if AT&T were to shut down CNN. Or Warner Media, or whoever controls CNN.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I believe, and I'm just going off of memory on this, but I believe just recently CNN Center in Atlanta was put up on the market.
Yes.
So there you go. That's a sign right there, right? That's something's happening, right?
That's a sign that CNN may be in some serious trouble.
Yeah.
And probably for good reason.
Well, I mean, seriously, CNN's like a carbon footprint. It's just like, you turn on, if you want to know what the CIA wants to brainwash people with, just turn on CNN for 10 minutes, and that's how you'll know.
Yeah, there you go, and there you go. You if you just turn on CNN for like even just 2 seconds, right then and there you're going to get brainwashed.
Absolutely.
That's how nuts CNN is.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's just completely insane, right? I mean,
yes,
yeah, it is. Now, I do have shifting gears. I'm trying to get this in, trying to keep viewers updated on this. Before we wrap up, there's a couple of things I want to mention regarding face masks. And one is from the state of Illinois. I have this little golden nugget of insanity to share with you here in just a second.
Boy.
Oh, yeah. Listen to what they say constitutes a definition for a COVID death. Let's just say it isn't as obvious as it should be. Here we go. Oh, get ready to be amazed. This is going to be incredible stuff.
Oh.
Earlier this week, the state reported the death of a teenager in Cook County. Are you familiar with this case? If so, is this the state's first teenage death? And can you tell us if the teenager in question had underlying conditions?
Okay, we're going to get a definition now of how you can determine whether or not someone died with COVID. Very simple.
Yeah, should be, right?
I don't have that information at my disposal at this time. I know we have had people of all age groups die. I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying.
Okay, here comes the definition of death by COVID.
Of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis.
That means no matter how you die, as long as you were positive for COVID when you died, you are a COVID death. Even if you got in a car wreck or you fell off a cliff, for whatever reason that you died, as long as you had COVID, it's counted as a COVID death. Listen.
So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It
There it was. Okay.
Oh boy.
She's going to make it more simple for us.
means that technically, even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death.
So technically, even if you died of an alternate cause, if you had COVID when you died, it's called a COVID death. You wonder why the numbers are messed up.
So,
Earlier
so David, that's a video from the state of Illinois. That guy is the governor of Illinois, and then whoever is with him, that might have, as obviously has something to do with health. And she's saying that a COVID death could mean anything they make it out to be, as long as it's the person's positive for it.
And you wonder why the amount of cases is so messed up across the country.
Well, it's election year. Election plus 1 day, they'll drop it like a hot potato. They'll just it's like they don't need this event anymore. They'll probably in the back room somewhere they'll say, "Thank you, China, very, very much for giving this gift of coronavirus to the world," and then go back to their normal life. I mean, I can just somewhere in the background, Bill Gates has got to be laughing.
Yep. At some point, can we just be done with 2020? At some point, can we just be done with 2020?
Oh yeah.
Crying out loud.
Now, one more thing before we wrap up, and David, I think this is like a lot of truth in one meme, but it's if you will, a little bit of humor, dare I say, maybe dark comedy, just a little bit. This is the number of confirmed cases according to this meme, and I can't vouch for these numbers, but obviously they have a significant number in all these countries, whether it's this number or another number. Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, India. Wearing face coverings their entire life and still reported to have COVID-19. Think, America, think. So all these people have had facial coverings as a matter of practice. Now, I don't know about India. That seems a little off to me, but I don't know. Maybe they do over there. I don't know. But think about this. They've had full facial coverings, and yet they still get COVID-19. Just saying. And yet we think these little itty-bitty masks have something to do with helping with that. So
It's just nuts. Speaking of face masks, guess what Oklahoma City and Tulsa wants to do?
oh, what's that?
Mandate face masks
Oh, of
in
course.
public.
Of course. They, when you get to that point where you are full on craving power, you will stop at nothing because tyranny has no limits. They take as far as they can.
And pretty much both Mayors Holt and GT Bynum of Tulsa, they're rhinos.
Yeah.
What they are.
Yeah, they're fake
Republicans in name only.
Well, think about the South Carolina governor. Look what he just did. He basically said, and now personally, I don't drink, but I'm just mentioning this because I became aware of it. But the South Carolina governor has now ordered that bars close at 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I didn't know that coronavirus only spread after 11 p.m. At 11 p.m., all of a sudden coronavirus starts spreading. That literally makes no sense. I mean, how in the world? Where do these people get their logic from?
As Judge Judy used to say, if something doesn't make sense, it's usually not true.
Well, I mean, when it comes to insanity, there's nothing to make sense of with insanity because insanity is the absence of logic.
Right, and therefore it's not true.
Yeah. It's just I just cannot believe with the world we live in right now.
All I gotta say is not only is this an election year, but I think, Jonathan, we may be living in the last days.
Oh, I believe that. I mean, look at this. The face mask. Look how many people are complying with that. If all these people comply with face mask coverings, then if it comes around to being Mark of the Beast, they'll say, "Yep, I'll just get." They'll just like, "Yep, yep." They'll just take one in the forehead or on the forearm or whatever. It's just like there is no. I mean, now we have completely lost it when it comes to preserving personal rights and liberties. So. People want to transform us into a socialist banana republic. I'm personally not complying with that. And, people, it's important that everybody understands all this. But when it gets right down to it, it comes down to the individual. Each individual can make a difference. And keep in mind, when we launched this republic in 1770, when we became a country, I should say, in 1776, we didn't have everyone in the population. We just had a certain number of people that decided that they wanted out of Great Britain. And they took a brave, bold stance to do that. So by that same token, you don't need everybody waking up and stop wearing masks and stop complying. We just need a certain group of people. And that's why education is so important right now. And if enough people understand what's going on here, it has nothing to do with health, it's all about control, then I think we can turn this tide around. I believe the Patriots are in control of America. God is in control, most importantly. And Bill Gates is not going to get his way, ultimately. Mm-hmm. So Bill Gates what a Frankenstein couple that they are.
He could literally continue to say that the highest bidder for the coronavirus vaccine, and by the way, he literally said this, I think yesterday, that he said that it's my understanding that the COVID-19 vaccine, whenever it comes out, he thinks that, it should go to those in need, not those. Not to the highest bidder, because if it goes to the highest bidder, the pandemic is going to be deadlier.
They need to do they need their population control. They got to get rid of they don't want all the 7 billion people. They think this is the insanity of the elite. They only want like themselves and then a few subservient people underneath them. They don't want a planet full of people. And, I just say those in Africa, you better resist this with all you got. If there's a vaccine coming your way, you need to run the other way. I'm just saying. And let's just say when it comes to the elites being charitable, let's just say if we look at Haiti, Hillary Clinton, if you ask a lot of people in Haiti, she's like the devil to them. Because, she didn't do anything to help them of real substance. She took all this money, so
and that's referring to the Haiti earthquake back in 2010.
Exactly. I should have said that, but exactly.
She didn't do diddly squat.
Yeah.
In that country.
Oh yeah. There's a lot more I could say on that subject, but I'll leave it right there. But I'll just say this in closing, that we need to, people need to keep vigilant and kind of keep their head on the swivel. Let me just say this in closing. There are arrests going down right now. There are people like, you've got this company called Wayfair. And a lot of people know who Wayfair is. It's an e-commerce site. Now, I don't know much about it, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about that because I don't want to say things that aren't true. But what I am hearing is that that's one of the things certain people surrounding that company that could be going down. So, we'll just leave it right there until I get more information on that, because I want to use only information that I'm confident to be true. So, so on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. David, tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, even though I don't really use either of those two platforms anymore. Same thing with Instagram. In fact, I haven't been on Instagram that much anymore. I'm just primarily on YouTube. My first and last name, David Heller, and that's pretty much it. anymore nowadays.
Yeah, and you can find me on Facebook. Find me on Facebook, Jonathan Shannon. Twitter at the Jonathan News. YouTube, my full name, Jonathan Ryan Shannon. You can find me on Instagram, Jonathan Shannon 96, and now on Parler with an E. You can find me on Parler at Real Jonathan Shannon. And also our website for the Citizen Report, thecitizenreport.weebly.com. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and for David Heller and myself, have a great evening, everyone, and we will see you right back here again next time. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.